iw.confetti.ac.uk, and just make sure that you're using your Confetti or your NTU email address when you're doing that. In case of an emergency, obviously your emergency exit's at the back of the building there, so if there's a fire alarm or anything else that goes off, please head there, and then just go to the corner of Brook Street, which is to the right of the building as you exit. So now just to introduce you to Joe, Barnett and Parisa.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Hi, Joe.
Hello.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to give you an introduction to Joe's career, which is incredible. I'm going to start in 2008, but it did start a bit before then, didn't it? So in 2008, you launched Outlook Festival in Croatia, alongside partners involved in the club events New Bohemia, Subdub and Vagabonds, building on the foundations of the early dubstep scene with a festival celebrating dubstep, reggae, hip-hop, drum and bass and jungle. This was for a capacity of 800 ticket buyers. By 2011, that became 11,000. In 2012, you launched Dimensions Festival, covering predominantly house and techno. In 2013, the locals in Pula in Croatia invited you to host events in a 2,000-year-old Roman amphitheatre, where some of the past performers include Lauryn Hill, Damian Marley, Anderson .Paak, Massive Attack, Grace Jones, Jurassic 5, Pharaoh Monch, Loyal Kana and the Outlook Orchestra with Marla, Roots Maneuver, Horace Andy, Ruby Wood and many, many more. In 2016, you started Sunfall in London. In 2018, you managed to get exclusive access to Zero Strasse, a network of secret tunnels used in World Wars I and II. To hold a rave in secret underground tunnels. In celebration of 10 years of the festival, you also launched a 22-piece orchestra, the Outlook Orchestra, to give a new platform to the music that you've celebrated. You have since created performances alongside David Rodigan, Marla Dizzy Rascal, and Fabia and Groove Rider. By 2019, you had your last event in the amphitheatre. In 2019, We Out Here Festival was launched in partnership with Giles Peterson in Cambridgeshire and Cross the Tracks Festival in Brockwell Park. On the 2nd of March 2020, New Bohemia Limited was incorporated before we knew the scale of COVID and before any lockdowns. You were recently appointed to the board of Association of Independent Festivals and have recently joined the Elevator Mentor Scheme for the events industry. In 2022, you were involved in multiple festivals, including Cross the Tracks, We Out Here, and the UK edition of Outlook, Outlook UK. And that's how we got talking, because you were offering discounts to anyone that wanted to go to the festival but couldn't quite afford it. So people would share their story and, if they couldn't afford full price. And then this year, you've also launched another event in Brockwell Park called Project 6.
I've never had my sort of career summarised to me, so thank you. But yeah, I think that's a pretty nice summary.
Well, so first of all, I want to know about your early life and any experience that you've had to lead you to where you are now.
Well, university, I think, actually. I think for me, I went to Sussex University down in Brighton, and I got about 3/4 of the way through the year and realised I really wanted to just put something on towards the end of the year, end of first year, and that was my first ever club night at the end of my first year, and I just loved the idea of bringing my friends together, having a bit of fun at the end of the year. I planned it out, took quite a long time to sort of plan out exactly what I wanted to do. I had a lot of friends that DJ'd different music, and I got the buzz. Absolutely loved it. I mean, it's really naff to say, but I loved, the sort of seeing my friends happy. I loved seeing behind the decks, in front of the decks. I loved, a little bit of a naff thing, but I enjoyed being able to bring my mates into the, past it. We were one in, one out on the door. I was charging my friends for basically my own birthday party. Which is a bit bleak, but no. For me, it was always a social thing. It was the social element of bringing people together, which really clicked for me. I've always loved the different musics that we've covered, but music wasn't the original source behind it. It was actually the social element and the planning and the delivery of it that actually was the main thing that I got really excited by, and it kind of it kind of took off from there, really. I mean, I only ran 3 club nights before the first festival.
Joking.
And I don't think I'd ever really been to many festivals at that point. I kind of didn't really know what I was doing at all. It was just a bit of a freak meeting, a bit of an opportunity.
The universe conspired in your favour.
Well, yeah. So in between my first and second year at university, I went travelling, and I went to Sziget Festival in Hungary, which is an amazing 8-day festival in Budapest. And I randomly met a guy who was wearing an all-in-one gorilla outfit, and we spent hours talking at this festival. Had no connection previously, and it turned out that he just started running a club night at Leeds University, and I just running a club night in Brighton. And we very drunkenly said, we should run a club night together, this would be fun. And like 2 months later, Facebook was still quite an early thing then. Facebook, he hit me up on Facebook and said, let's do it. So we launched a club night called Vagabonds in London, which, you know, I didn't really have any idea what I was doing. I'd done one for my mates in Brighton, and then we launched this in London, and that was really the sort of foundation for a partnership that then launched the festival, I think, 3 months after that. So, you know, some of my original business partners in the very first Outlook, I didn't meet until I got to site. There were 5 of us in total, and I only knew 4 of them. So one of them I met on site, and
wow,
it was really, really this opportunity that I knew lots of people, and I was a bit of a socialite when, you know, at university. Some of my other business partners were real music heads. They'd been running club nights for years, and they were really sort of invested into this early dubstep scene. And then another business partner of mine, Noah Ball, had been introduced to a couple of English guys who'd moved out to Croatia and set up this festival site. And they invited him and said, "Look, you know, you've been promoting for a while. Do you want to run a festival?" And he said, "Right, well, yeah, I'm going to have to build a team." So he kind of reached out to a few of us and pulled us all together. And yeah, it was completely opportunistic.
Wow.
But also one, as soon as it was presented, sort of grabbed with both hands.
Did you think you'd be in business together for this long?
It's certainly not at certain points throughout those times. No, it's been, you know, I could never have done what I've done over the years, you know, at the beginning and at a number of points throughout that time without a really solid sort of business partnership with different people over the years. And, you know, I'm really blown away when I see individuals running companies because of the sort of stress and pressure that comes along with running events like this. I'm not sure I could have done that. And we have, although, you know, it is really difficult also balancing things with other people's interests, other people's perspectives and ideas. It's also really, really important to sort of to clash and to have those different ideas and then come out with something, you know, in the middle that hopefully works.
I was going to say there are some artists as well as teammates that you've worked with for a very long time, and like, what are the qualities that you value in these long-term business relationships?
I think that some of the best relationships I've had with artists over the years have been those people that really understand what it is that we're trying to do with the events. And from my perspective, when we curate these shows and when we've built these brands, it's been there's always been like reasons as to why we want to do it. You know, the early Outlook festivals were a celebration of, you know, I think one of the last sort of true genres to come out of the UK in dubstep, where it was really based out of communities. It was pre, you know, the hype created around social media. It was around this. It's for me, it's always been about sort of giving a platform to a community, and that's definitely true with Outlook, and it's definitely true with We Out Here, where there's this network of people that have a real passion around a culture, and it doesn't necessarily have one place to sort of come together and celebrate that culture. And Outlook, you know, we now sort of term what we've done with Outlook as celebrating sound system culture. So for us, it's not just about the music, but it's about all of the values and the rich culture that came from the Windrush generation coming over to the UK in the 60s and what the sound system represented to that culture. It wasn't just about dub and reggae, dubstep, the evolution of that sound, but the impact that that had on the UK culture and the UK music industry since then. And let's try and give a platform to all of it. And with We Out Here, you know, Giles Peterson's my business partner in that, and he's been spearheading a number of different genres over the 30 years that he's been on radio. But this sort of re-emerging jazz scene that he produced an album called We Out Here, which is we then named our festival after. When you come to site and you see what's happening on site at We Out Here, it is just like, it's like a network of friends. Friends that haven't met or don't even realise that they're friends until they meet. I think the artists that see the value in that is where I see the best relationships that are formed, that see what we're doing behind the festivals and buy into it, and see how they can also contribute. You know, lots of artists see their craft and see themselves as artists to come and perform, and many come and go. They don't necessarily engage. They don't necessarily engage in advance of the show, and that, you know, that's their prerogative. In many ways, they are performers. I've really valued those relationships with people that want to shout about what's different about what we're doing. You know, trying to create something that's not just a homogenous lineup, and something that, you know, supports younger artists and gives back to those younger artists. That's, but people that also just have a lot of fun. Like, there's a lot of serious artists out there, and it is, I'm sure, a really difficult thing to sort of bring the energy every single time. But those people that are genuinely enjoying what they're doing on stage, whatever it might be doing, other people I just want to have back.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you say somewhere that you've always booked artists that you wanted to see. It's not just about what's popping and what's, like, you know, getting the ratings or whatever. It's about what you like, because all of your festival lineups are eclectic, and I would say a soulful undertone, and that it's your passion that has put this together. There's a statement, NVS Music Group. Is that still going? Have you dissolved it?
So MVS was the acronym of New Bohemia Vagabonds and Subdub, and it was the original company that founded Outlook. New Bohemia is now our overall company, myself and my business partner Noah, that sort of sits above all of the businesses that we run now. So Outlook, Dimensions, We Out Here, Across the Tracks, Wide Awake, Project 6, are all separate companies. Right. So we needed some sort of entity that would sit above those, and we employ our full-time team through that and sort of recharge out. So it's a little bit of a business structure position. Well,
on Resident Advisor, there's still an MVS statement out there that says, we create life-changing and life-affirming experiences. We offer the opportunity to get away, to fulfill wanderlust and share joyous moments with friends, and to come of age. We offer adventures that will never be forgotten. So with this in mind, the audience experience is obviously important to you. So talk to us about how you manifest this to, like, give the audience a great experience, but also protect their well-being.
As I say, like, music is a big passion, but it's not. It wasn't the catalyst for me originally. So it is for my business partners, however. So it's, again, you've kind of got that nice balance in the sense that when we approach new shows, I think of things from an audience experience point of view, sort of outside of the music. We curate these brands and we try and work out what we want the brand to represent and the brand identity to be, and who our target audience is. But ultimately, for me, the experience is much, much bigger than just the music. My background, actually, what I was studying at university, which I just about finished with launching the festivals and club nights, but my background was psychology. And so I've always kind of come at these things from a bit of a psychological, individual well-being perspective. And I'm going to get it wrong because I get it wrong every single time, but there are like 5 pillars that the NHS or anyone recognises as contributing factors towards individual well-being, which are connecting between people, you know, a sense of community and a senses, so engaging one's senses, learning, continued growth, giving, and movement. Nailed it, 5. And I always come. I think that festivals have this huge potential to sort of harness everything they can do, and I approach sort of programming of festivals from those 5 things. I mean, you know, senses are always going to get overloaded in a positive way at festivals, and you know, if you can focus in on that community, how do you bring your people together? How do you allow them to connect? But things like growth, continued learning, and giving, I think, are potentially somewhat overlooked in certain shows. And I think that actually, more so, we're focusing on those. So, for example, this year at We Out Here, we're operating a donation scheme. So every customer, they've bought their ticket. Part of that ticket will be a £1 voucher, and each person will receive that £1 voucher when they arrive. And they can only donate that £1 voucher to one of the on-site charities. And one of the different difficulties around, you know, welcoming charities to a festival site is the fact that they don't know whether they're really going to cover their costs in doing so. But if there's 12,000 tickets out there, £12,000 in donatable vouchers, I can welcome, you know, 10, 15 different charities on site. And the voucher means that people have to go and engage with it, which means that they sort of feel like they've given back to those charities. So yeah, I always kind of look at things from that point of view. But I think we've always, sort of to go back to your original point, we've always looked at things from a discovery point. I think an element of discovery, musical discovery, has always been part of what we do. We used to ask people, you know, who they wanted to see at the next year's festival, and we would ignore every single comment because, you know, you would get the same answer, because you get the same answer in terms of, you know, you get the same headliners at all the different shows. And don't get me wrong, we've certainly booked a number of them over the years, but really for us the exciting stuff was the people that don't play other shows, that don't play on other festival lineups. And I think that, I sound like a really old person now, but I think that, you know, the influence of the internet, I think, is a contributing factor towards homogenising lineups. And so I think that we just try and fight that as much as we can. And I think, you know, We Out Here, for example, is super different from anything else that's happening.
It's actually like the first year I went to We Out Here, because for those of you who don't know, We Out Here Festival, they invited regional promoters to put on a launch party. So the brand that I work on, Acoustical, we were part of the team that did the Nottingham launch party. So we got free tickets to go down there, and we were also allowed to give free tickets out to our community, to get different people down there to enjoy, and it was a very generous offer. And I was only able to go for one day that weekend. I set foot there and I felt, even though it was raining and it was really cold, it was the best festival I've ever been to. Like, literally the vibe of it, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was so beautiful. And then like a year later, I went back for more days, and I just feel like it is literally such like a beautiful, welcoming, vibrant place. It's so diverse. You've got artists from all different backgrounds. Like you're saying, it's not just, no offense, but a load of middle-aged white men that are on the lineup. Do you know what I mean? You have everyone. I mean, even this year, is it Outlook? You've got Nia Archives pretty much headlining.
She's actually playing We Out Here as well.
Right, there you go.
Both shows.
So, you know, a young emerging producer has been catapulted to the top of these festival lineups, where she's going to get seen by thousands and thousands of people so early in her career. Like, those kind of life-changing things that you do for people by putting them on the festivals shouldn't be taken for granted. But I just want to like sidestep that a minute, and let's talk about the marketing and the branding of your events, and not only like how you're individually branding these different events and marketing them to the different audiences, but how you're scaling up, because you need to sell thousands and thousands of tickets for each one to make them viable.
Quick reminder, yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, when we're starting, obviously, we're starting with the question, like, why are we doing this in the first place? You know, what's the point in doing something? Yes, you know, you summarise my career there, and I've clearly got an addiction for launching new products. But I think, you know, we've always tried to, you know, obviously look for a gap in the market in terms of what it is that we're offering, and I think that a phrase that I've always sort of somewhat lived by and really liked was that however the big companies in the industry pick up on what you're doing and cannibalise on different scenes, left field will always exist. And we are just, you know, we are an independent left field music festival organisation. And if, for example, as and when grime became a really big thing, we sort of tweaked and modified exactly who we're working with. You know, we booked Skepta for a few years, and then he became, you know, an international star. And then we booked Stormzy, and then he became, you know, so you're always sort of staying left field of what the majors and the big commercials side of things are doing. So I think, you know, a festival name is, I've been through this process so many times, and I think that the sort of the thing that I've always tried to lean for is just something that means absolutely nothing. So, you know, if you're trying to be too clever with a name, I think you will get a divisive response. If you come up with something really bland and just imprint what it is about that festival, about that community, about, you know, why you're doing it, then people will always associate it with it. That, I mean, Outlook, someone I think just came up with in a pub, and we went, okay, fine, let's just do something. I mean, that's a really crap lesson, I'm sure.
Do you think we'd be able to watch some of the videos? We've got a few 1-minute clips, so don't judge like the editing because they haven't put it out at the 1 minute. But if we could start with 2012, and then we'll have a look at the boat party one, if that's okay.
So long I've been gone, so many things have changed, but I know where I belong, and I know when I reach that place.
Where the fuck y'all at? What? Help us out. Come on, come on, come on. Say on and on and on and on. Come on and on and on and on.
So that was 2012. No.
No, yeah, but I'm shaking my head at remembering back.
I've got major FOMO. Can we try the Khan and Neek boat parties? Because you run boat parties, you send artists out there in the middle of the ocean.
Some of the best experiences.
And literally, like, some of your favourite artists will just be hosting a boat party and having a little rave on a boat for a select amount of people that are there. Let's have a look at this.
We know that temperature turn up, step to the side, man, a man don't run. Cool, calm, we down, fun up. Yeah, check to the angle, still feels hot like summer. Yo, you're deep in my crew. If I eat food, I eat food in my crew. If I smoke weed in my crew. How about you, how about your crew? And again, yeah, roll deep in my crew. If I eat food, I eat food in my crew. If I smoke weed in my crew. How about you, how about your crew? It's not easy.
Maybe we could have a look at 2022 as well, and that's all the videos. Because if you think, like, Outlook started in 2008.
Every Wednesday, every Friday, every Sunday night, it's a roadblock, block, 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 block.
Let's do this.
I've never watched those on such an amazing screen and system.
The tech here is gorgeous. Thanks, lads, ladies.
Doing it justice.
Okay, so now those videos have inspired some new questions, and we're going to take questions from the audience soon as well. But let's look at the infrastructure there. You've gone into somewhere where there's, I don't know, are there even power? Is there power supply? How do you get the power in there?
No, that's all temporary power. So the fort was, the first 2 years in Croatia, we ran at sort of plug-and-play festival sites, where the infrastructure is all there. And we grew from, as you say, from 800 in our first year to 1,500 in our second year, and then we just jumped massively into the fort, which is our third year, and we decided, we're going to really make a thing of this. And we did 4,500 customers that year in our third year, and we sort of got about 6 months into the campaign and sort of realised we really need to work out how to do this. And we're working in an industry, in Croatia, where there was very, very little industry. There was no real sort of festival industry at that time. So we had, we had local partners out there, and we were working with them to try and find stage suppliers, and a lot of it actually came from around Europe. So all the sound systems came from the UK or from around Europe, a majority from the UK. And every stage had an individual sound system hand-picked for it and designed for it. But things like the moats, which I'm not sure actually featured there too much, but the festival took place for 10 years in an old Austro-Hungarian fortress. So this is like built in 1860 or something. And it has a moat surrounding it and a drawbridge that you sort of go into the fort over. And we got there, and there's this heavily overgrown moat with trees, and we went, I want to do a show in there. And, it was a bit of a joke when we first said it. And then the following year, we sort of rented in this huge infrastructure from Germany to build temporary staircases into the moat. And we built out a sort of, I think it was 1,200 capacity, long arena, about 90 meters long, which I think 10 years later it was voted the best techno venue in the world. It was a poll between that and Berghain. So yeah, it was really, really challenging. And over the years we invested into the site. But the first year I actually had one of the local crew. I had his 13-year-old daughter helping us find infrastructure, and she now works for me on the shows. So she's like, I think we're 12 years later, and she still works on all the festivals.
Amazing, because you've got staging, lighting, sound tech, the DJ equipment, everything front of house, back of house, and then in terms of when you're working in spaces like that, a Roman fortress, surely there's a bit of vulnerability with the infrastructure of the buildings, like the rocks falling down and things like that. How do you manage all of that? How do you prevent people getting hurt, really, when they're drunk,
I mean, I'm not going to lie, we had some close calls. We've had some close calls in the early years when we were still, somewhat learning what we were doing. And you have a close call and you definitely learn from it. But I think ultimately we always invested. I mean, if we had a good year in terms of ticket sales, we just spent the money we had. We just invested into more and more sort of the professionalism that has been created in the UK over the years. So we took out traffic management consultants to build a traffic system. We took out, every year I took out UK security to oversee the Croatian security firms, and we trained Croatian security to UK standards. We took out UK health and safety suppliers every single year who oversaw everything that we did. So it was, it was certainly a lot of infrastructure and a lot of expertise came from the UK, but more and more over the years we relied upon our Croatian locals and infrastructure that we'd help to put in place.
So you were hiring Croatian locals to work on the festival?
Yeah, so for security is a good example. Over the years, we worked with one security firm who, I'll be honest, in the first year, were appalling, and attacked our customers.
Okay.
Their technique for convincing people to get out of the sea at night time when it wasn't safe was to throw rocks at them. And so I've had to sort of come face to face with effectively mafia bosses who run security companies, and and say, look, this isn't on.
Okay, so let's dig here a little bit more, going off plan, yeah? Mafia bosses, you've turned up, a load of English boys, you want to run a festival, you're going to make loads of money in their view. Like, go on, give us some insight on how you're handling that, because if a load of Croatian people came to England to run a festival, I'm sure there would be some kind of friction there.
Yeah, I mean, and it wasn't just those people, it was like throughout. It was, you know, whether you're dealing with someone local who, you know, has to put up with this taking place on their doorstep, whether you're dealing with the local mayor, whether you're dealing with somebody who wants to come and trade, like across the board, it was, you know, there was a level of sort of animosity. But equally, there was also the huge like element of respect for what we were kind of bringing to the area. And those security, you know, I've had a meeting with the chief of police where he literally took his gun out of his pocket, checked that the magazine was loaded, and put it back in, like in the middle of a conversation. And it was absurd. I mean, and I was, you know, I mean, at that occasion I was probably 28. But when I first started the festivals, the first year we put the show on, launched it when I was 20, and we did the first festival when I was 21. So was kind of coming up against these people. But I think that the respect over the years came from doing it properly. And I think that actually over the years, if you treated those people with respect, they sort of showed it back to you. So, for example, in the UK, what we do is we invite all of the local agencies to come and engage with us around how we deliver the festival. So there's a group called the Safety Advisory Group, which is made up of all of your local agencies, and then you can then have those agencies on your festival site. So, for example, at We Out Here this year, I will have police, I will have licensing, I'll have, you know, I won't necessarily have medical on site, but in Croatia, we said, look, we'd like to invite you to an ELT, which is Emergency Liaison Team, which is basically the team that meets up every day to sort of make sure that the festival's running smoothly. And they sort of said, what do you mean? And I said, we would like to invite you into our meetings that we conduct so that you're aware of any trends that are happening, any concerns that we're having. And they said, that doesn't happen. And I said, well, it does in the UK and it really works. And so they didn't come the first year. And the second year they kind of came and they understood why we did it and why a closer relationship works. And you know, probably built a better relationship between a festival and the policing service in Croatia than they've ever had before.
Like, how do you learn to even hold an ELT, or what you need to do? Like, is there somebody that was like much more experienced than you that was kind of helping guide that? Like, is it all kind of trial and error? Did you do loads of research? Like, how are you learning about all of the little T's that you have to cross and the I's that you have to dot?
I think a combination between common sense and working with people that have done these things. So, you know, I think quite often we'd probably go through a process where you'd bring somebody on board who had the experience for something like an ELT meeting. And you kind of realise that you're almost doing it anyway. Because, you know, it's important that each of your different departments are getting updates on a day-to-day basis during the festival so that there's good communication and everyone understands what's going on. And then someone comes in that has the experience of doing it at festivals, and they say, oh, cool, let's form an ELT. And you say, oh, that's that meeting we've been... So I think the one thing that if I had anything going into doing all of this, it was a certain level of like confidence in my own common sense and logic. And if you can think about every element of a festival as much as possible, and you've got the time to sort of plan it out, I think that I always sort of backed myself to try and structure things in a logical way. And then you bring people on board who just absolutely refine it. And every so often, you know, I've had people come on board and just completely throw out how we've been doing something previously and look at it from a different angle, and you step back and go, okay, I see it.
So in terms of freelancers, because you've got a relatively small core team to say you're doing all this work, how many freelancers on average are you working with per festival? Is that a difficult question?
It's a difficult question. I mean, for years, for example, we used to run a volunteer scheme for Outlook and Dimensions. I think we had 1,000 volunteers over the 2 weeks. So, you know, and those were just people fulfilling sort of stewarding roles that just sort of helped facilitate the smooth running. You know, on We Out Here, you probably have 250 security staff alone, and probably in the region of 100 different contractors at different departments. The way in which we break it down is by those departments, and that's how you sort of compartmentalise. This is again showing my age, but I always think back of GCSE bite size and just breaking down the entire thing.
We're the same age, by the way.
But breaking down, you know, into really small elements, and grouping those elements together. So, you know, operations, for example, is a department, and that summarises security, medical, welfare, traffic, stewarding, and those things logically come together, as well as site infrastructure is a department, and that is your fencing, your power, your site lighting, and your toilets and your Wi-Fi. Whereas tech production for me is a different department, which is your stage lighting, your video screens, your sound systems, your backline.
Right. So with all of the pressure and the stress of putting something like this together, as well as having to manage teams of volunteers, I mean, I don't know how involved you are in every aspect, but do you have any like personal well-being practices, anything that you could potentially pass on for people that are working in high-pressured situations like this?
I had a nice conversation with one of my team last year, and you know, it was quite eye-opening for me, and I asked her how she found working with me, and she said, well, sometimes my lack of stress stresses her out, so she doesn't really understand, you know, in this moment. And we had a nice joy. It was in the middle of a festival. We took a moment to just walk outside of the festival and just have a nice conversation, and she referenced the fact that, you know, if something needed to happen, I didn't reflect the anxiety that she felt in that moment when she was presenting it to me and trying to work out what was going, you know, what we should do. And I realised that, you know, I realised in myself that actually the reason that I wasn't stressed about, you know, whatever it was in this circumstance, was because, like, it wasn't a major problem if it didn't happen. You know, this thing that she wanted to happen, and she would refer to it as it needs to happen, but need is a word that I, like, categorically refuse anyone in my team to use. It's a, you know, need is actually 99% of the time dressed up as a desire, but, you know, and what happens if it doesn't? So, you know, catastrophizing something is all about running over the scenario of what happens if it doesn't, you know. Whereas actually, if you ask, okay, what happens if this thing doesn't happen? And you sort of run that scenario and say, well, it didn't happen. Okay, well, there's one person who might notice that this one light up on a stage isn't there, or this sign isn't up, or whatever. And you run that scenario and you say, is everyone going to sort of end the show happy? And if ultimately the answer is that there's a major financial implication to it, or if there's a major security and safety issue to it, then yes, this is a really big issue and we need to consider it. But ultimately, if it's a small element of customer satisfaction, then you know, in the scheme of things, compared to someone's well-being, like, what's the point in stressing over it? And I realised actually in that moment that communicating that was a really important part of how to manage my team, is to say, well, look, I am the person who owns this and is the one who's going to be affected if the customers aren't happy, because it might affect business. And if I'm not worried, then you shouldn't be worried. So I think that you know, running those scenarios and what was something that my mum always used to say to me. My mum's a psychotherapist, which is why psychology was a thing for me. But you know, and what? It's a sort of classic cognitive behavioural therapy technique of, like, and what? Okay, and if that happens, and what? And you know, I think perhaps one of the most difficult things for me was that, you know, I launched Outlook when I was 20. I was running Vagabonds as a club night from 20. And I mean, even on Facebook, my name was Joe Vagabonds Barnett for like 12 years. Everyone knew me as Joe Vagabonds. And I think one of the biggest challenges from a well-being perspective and, you know, an anxiety perspective is like, if this all goes wrong, at some point, I'm not going to be known as that. And, you know, it's a major part of my identity that's not there. And I think that, again, just running that scenario, I think that, you know, being proud of what you've achieved so far and being conscious of that and living in the moment as much as possible and saying, right, if we can do more of this stuff later, if we can make it happen, if we can survive through COVID and other craziness that and Brexit and everything else that we've dealt with, if we can survive, then, you know, amazing. And if not, then what a whirlwind. But, you know, detaching myself a little bit from the brands has been, you know, quite a big challenge. But personally, I would say my biggest two escapes are like spending time outdoors with my dog and certainly having a friendship group that are outside of the industry as well. I know lots of people that their life is the industry and the people that they work with, which is amazing, and it's an amazing part of the industry. But I think also some of the most balanced people that I've met in the industry have a really sort of good footing outside of it as well. Yeah, and I hope you don't mind me saying, you said that you stopped drinking alcohol. Has that helped? It definitely helped. It's definitely helped delivering the shows. I never. That's not true. I always took my role quite seriously on site because of my responsibility, whatever stage that's been. And I learned quite a difficult lesson actually in terms of alcohol years and years ago. Was that it was the last night of running 2 festivals. This is actually 2012, the video that you saw. It was the first time we'd run Dimensions Festival. We ran two different festivals back to back, and everyone who delivered it was like broken by the end of and it was the first time we'd done it. On the last night of the festival, everyone celebrated. They often do. I celebrated with them. Not something I've done since. And I went to bed and was quite soon woken up as the event director because we sadly had a death on site, and that was somebody who had died off-site, but it was one of our customers. And I mean, trust me, I sobered up incredibly quickly, but it was a really, really big, effectively, I think I was, 2012, I would have been 25 at the time, and I was, effectively overseeing a major incident that included, a significant amount of foreign press, as well as police and medical and ambulance services, and that lasted with me. And that's not the reason I stopped drinking at all. I stopped drinking just because hangovers make me anxious, and not being productive makes me pissed off at myself. So I relate hard. I relate. Okay, so seems like there are other issues we could talk about, for instance, like customer complaints, maybe last-minute venue changes, artist cancellations. But I feel like we've kind of touched on some of that already. So I would like to discuss a few things here. First of all, any favourite live acts that you've had over the years, and are there any that you became a fan of after you saw them perform? I think, so I saw at one of our shows, but and someone we've booked a few times, but I saw a performer called Grove. I don't know whether you know Grove. They are this amazing vocalist, sort of features like punk to club to like a patois vocals, and it's this incredible mixture, and they're this really, really powerful performer, but performing on small stages. And actually, when they performed at Outlook, I was really blown away, and have been quite big fan of that since. I think it's a really naff thing to say, but I every time we do the orchestra, I'm blown away by it because I grew up listening to the music. Like, so the most recent orchestra show that we've been doing, the repertoire is a celebration of jungle and the history of drum and bass and jungle. And Fabio and Groove Rider are like the legends of this scene, and they've curated this incredible score that we've put to an orchestra, which I think, just from my perspective, is like, it's so amazing to see the people that made these tunes excited by hearing it live in a way that they've never seen for something they made like 20 years ago.
Like you watching the video of what you've created here.
I think a little. Oh, I don't know. I hope a little bit differently in the sense that, something they put in. Yeah, but not quite 20 years ago, but nearly.
So when you were discussing the 2022 edition of Outlook, which you held at Chalmondy Castle, you were quoted to say that over the last 14 years, Outlook Festival has been an incredible party, but underpinning it has been the community of people with a love of this music and culture. We've seen countless dub plates made, new partnerships forged, tunes produced, and friendships made, and to have the ability to bring that together again on UK soil is amazing. So talk to us about the differences of having it in the UK, and also what, like, I think you said COVID and Brexit had impacted that.
Yeah, so Brexit was a bit of a disaster, if I'm completely honest. I mean, we were obviously running in a foreign country. A lot of the sales are from the UK, which means that we're converting money from pound sterling to the local currency, kuna, or to euros, where we're paying for suppliers. And in that sort of conversion means that we're forecasting a certain exchange rate, and I didn't back us to vote to leave the EU. So, that year alone, for example, on the fateful referendum day, from my point of view, the exchange rate changed immediately based on the outcome of that vote, and we lost £250,000 overnight because of the exchange rate difference. And it never bounced back, and it still hasn't. So the pound is not as strong as it used to be. So just since then, from a financial point of view, it's been really difficult to operate in that fashion where you're selling in the UK and building something elsewhere. But I think also logistically, you can't drive a truck from the UK to Croatia now without going through a huge amount of bureaucracy, and there's a huge amount of cost associated with it. So that was one of the reasons why in 2019 we scaled the festivals down from the Fort down to where we're currently running, which is a sort of plug-and-play festival site in Tisno. I've gone on a tangent. What was your question again?
I was just asking you about having Outlook on UK soil, and some of the positives as well, like the dub plates, the partnerships, the music that's come out of those collaborations. Yeah,
I think one of the challenges that, and especially sort of reflecting here even today, I think one of the challenges that we're always up against is, if we believe that we're trying to bring together a culture and a community, doing it in a fort in Croatia was always a bit of a challenge there. Because, on the one hand, you're restricting people that can only fly or, take international transport, and people that have a passport, for example, people that can spend that money on an international show, which is becoming more and more challenging with, the cost of living today. And for us to be able to do something in the UK felt like a really exciting opportunity for all those people that never had that opportunity to travel. And it is that community. I mean, for me, one of the most exciting elements of that community was the backstage community. I've never seen anything like it at Outlook. The artists would come for the full weekend, and they would just, it was their holiday. A lot of those artists didn't perform internationally, but they got this opportunity each year. And they would rent villas down the road, and they would make tunes together, and it was like the one coming together of this whole scene. And so doing that in the UK last year was really, really exciting. Also really challenging, You know, we did it at a time where the cost of delivering festivals, like my shows last year, the cost of delivering a show went up 20% because of fuel prices, which was a knock-on impact of the war in Ukraine, as well as other factors. But, you know, 20% doesn't sound like a huge amount. When you're delivering a show that costs, you know, 2 million quid to deliver, an additional £400,000 in infrastructure costs is not easy to just pass back on to the customer. And we saw it this year, you know, in terms of, and I think one of the other points was around cost of living and the sort of access. I think, you know, there's been quite a lot of talk this year, for example, around Glastonbury put up the tickets. As, you know, it's a huge amount of money to go to Glastonbury nowadays. And Glastonbury is a not-for-profit organisation. That is not somebody putting up their ticket price because they want to earn loads of money and make a massive profit. They're doing it because they need to cover their costs, and it costs a huge amount to deliver festivals now. So, you know, I think one of our challenges has always been a little bit about how do we keep access to culture there for people. And it does sound a little bit hypocritical based on someone that's run festivals in Croatia for such a long time, but actually those are some of our values that have evolved over the time that we've been doing it. And for example, We Out Here, the scheme that Acoustical was involved in, was all part of an Arts Council grant that allowed us to seed tickets to, you know, demographics that are underrepresented, either within the behind the scenes in terms of the industry, and in terms of our performers, and in terms of seeding tickets in terms of our audience as well. So we've done quite a bit through We Out Here, especially, and the scheme that you mentioned, you know, Pay What You Can Afford with Outlook, is a continued sort of pursuit, if we can, to try and make some of our tickets affordable. But We Out Here, for example, you know, tickets are £210 for We Out Here. That's a lot of money. And we haven't launched it yet, but we will be launching another scheme that's a little bit different, but another scheme that is, again, A, seeding tickets, so it's going to have a number of different parts, but A, seeding tickets, B, discounting tickets based on income, and C, you know, trying to offer some sort of affordability thing.
Okay, I'll send you my tax return. So, so yeah, I mean, like festivals, really, it's like a staycation now, isn't it? It's a holiday at home. In the UK, and you do have to choose. There's a lot of competition. So, I mean, you're running quite a lot of festivals yourself, but how are you standing out amongst the competition? Because, and even with yourself, are you competing with yourself? Because you got Cross the Tracks Festival, I think that's in May. Yep. The lineup is insane. I wish I could go there. And then you've got We Out Here Festival. I'm definitely trying to reach that because Mozdef and Talib Kweli. Hello, headliners. But you've got, like, throughout the year, you've got all these festivals. Then you've got all of these competitive festivals. Like, what are you really doing to, like, stand out and make sure you get your audiences there?
I'm not sure. I think you know, people in business talk about, you know, economic recession being obviously a challenge, but one of the impacts of a recession is that the winners will win and the losers will lose. And what that kind of means is that, you know, if you stand out and you are already successful and you're already in people's minds as a really good opportunity and way to go and spend your money, then people will continue to do that. And that's kind of where we hope that we can still survive some of the economic challenges that we're coming up against. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're into We Out Here, like, in my opinion, and I'm biased, but if you're into sort of elements of We Out Here, like, We Out Here is the best festival to go to. Not for everyone, not, you know, it's not musically for everyone, and certain people will want, like, much bigger celebrations of, like, production elements, you know, in terms of lighting and decor and theatre and performing arts, for example. We don't cover those things, but what we focus on is, you know, is that community and how we build it in so many different ways. So I think that, I hope that in those scenarios where, you know, which is very likely, that if people are going from spending money on 2 different festivals, they're probably choosing one nowadays.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that in that example, We Out Here, whilst it is expensive because costs are going up, it is still good value comparatively to its competitors. And yes, you know, there is an element where, you know, we've got fairly similar sort of sounds and experience in Cross the Tracks compared to We Out Here. Cross the Tracks is a much more, and not to undermine it at all, is a much more sort of transactional experience in the sense that it's a day festival in London. You don't get this immersive environment where you can just basically turn your phone off and just be. And that, you know, that's for me is always one of the critical things about festivals. Can you just go and immerse yourself in it and try and switch off from the outside world? So I think that, you know, the emotional experience of those two things is actually quite different, and the investment in experience is quite different financially and emotionally and time-wise and everything. They're quite different things. So we've tried to sort of, hopefully we've thought about them.
Well, yeah, because last year I went to Cross the Tracks, and I didn't know anything about Joe. It wasn't until we spoke on email that, it wasn't until I was even researching you really that I found out you were involved in all of these. But having been for one day to We Out Here in 2019 and one day to Cross the Tracks last year, you hit the nail on the head. They are completely different experiences. So the audience, whilst they might want to go and see Masego and like Ezra Collective or whatever at the different festivals, like the actual experience, the way it's laid out, the way like the site is mapped, even the food that you've got and stuff like that, it is totally different. So how much are you considering the demographic of the audience when you're building these things, or is it just kind of, you know?
I mean, it's the starting point, really. You know, who your target audience absolutely is the starting point. And sometimes you build these things that you think are really cool and cross over from one genre to another, and you think you know, this would be amazing. And then you realise, like, you're really just talking to yourself, and there's not enough of that crossover between different things. And I suppose, you know, mapping out your audience is your sort of foundational thing. In terms of Cross the Tracks, I think that there is enough where people will go to one day festival and one camping festival. There's also some people that don't like camping festivals. I mean, like I'm
not into camping.
Not into camping, exactly. And it's we do try and do what we can to cater for that. We Out Here in terms of like really affordable glamping options and trying to go choose places that have hotels and stuff nearby. But it's not for everyone. And being able to do that in a more one-day environment. But I love the 4-day camping scenario. Or, you know, we did Outlook was 7 days one year. You know, where you can go and do talks, and you can go and do something with the rest of your time that's not like, you don't have to be on the whole time.
Swim in the ocean.
Swim in the...
Oh, okay. So I've got 2 more questions for Joe, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. There is a microphone to go around. So 2 questions. Do you have a favourite festival that you're involved with, and why? And the last question would be, what would you be doing if not this? So what's your favourite festival that you're involved in, if you've got one?
I think We Out Here. I will go with We Out Here. Outlook is absolutely like, it's what this whole experience has been based on, and my identity, and it has been sort of tied in with it. But I love the format of We Out Here. I love having children on site, if I'm honest. Yeah. You know, I think it's a really, again, you know, come back to like psychology, like having kids on site makes you check yourself. It means that you might not do, you know, another there's things I probably shouldn't say if it's can of beer. If you might not have that extra can of beer on a Sunday afternoon because there's children knocking about, and you think, actually, I'm gonna look after myself here. And you know, it acts as an element of self-reflection by having children there. And I think that not everyone, but lots of people love kids, and a smiling, happy child enjoying a festival is a super infectious thing. And so I love that element of it. I love the fact that we've got these charities on site, this like well-being option, so many different facets to it. And I think that it does touch on those individual well-beings, and I think the passion that comes out of it is so wholesome and joyous. Outlook's been quite a hedonistic experience over the years. Not always, but you know, it has been. Whereas I think We Out Here for me has sort of taken on board elements of the community vibe, the passion, the roar, the party, but also all the other things that I've kind of wanted to do over the years.
The energy is tangible. Like, literally, as I said, like, as soon as I walked on the festival site, I was just there for a minute. I was like, yo, this is amazing. And then the next time I actually managed to spend the whole weekend, because my best friend said, I'll set up a nice camping for us. I'll bring a blow-up mattress. I was like, I'll sleep in my car. You can camp. She was like, no. And it was just incredible to be there all the way to the very last drop, and then, you know, drove back to Nottingham. But so go on. What would you be doing if not this?
It's so. I mean, I think about it. I do think about it a lot. I think about what I might do next, and do I want to do this for my whole life? And you know, it does come with a lot of stress. And COVID. I mean, actually, COVID was quite nice, if I'm completely honest. You know, cancelled everything, and I stopped, and it was the closest thing I've had to sort of sabbatical. You know, I did have like all these existential question marks as to whether I was ever going to be able to run a festival again, and whether all of my businesses were going to collapse, and whether I was going to have any income. And you know, those things are obviously somewhat stressful in their own right, but equally, not having the responsibility. Like, since the very first festival, in my second year at university, I've effectively had the responsibility of the next year and the next year, and always there. So it's always been a consistent thing. So I've definitely thought about it. I love the business. I love running a company. I love. I've recently started mentoring, as you said, and I really enjoy that as a. I've really enjoyed having a coach at different points as well, and I've always been interested potentially in getting into coaching. I don't know. You know, the entrepreneurial element of what I do, I could probably find passion in a lot of different things. Not to say that I'm super lucky to be dealing with the content of running festivals, but I think I could also find some quite exciting angles behind running a company making screws. I don't know. You know, I think actually just that running a company is a big part of it.
Yeah, you are definitely an international entrepreneur. I could talk to you for days, I think, on end, so I'm going to stop because everything you're saying is inspiring more. But hopefully you've got some questions for Joe and that you've enjoyed this talk. The microphone is floating. We've got another festival entrepreneur right there, Richard Walpole, who teaches here. Go on. Any questions for Joe? Shout them out.
When you expanded Outlook Festival from Croatia to the UK, which of these music genres represent that festival?
So we kept the music quite similar when we went from Croatia to the UK, and it was still very much trying to represent as much of the this sound system culture. And we actually tried to utilise the event in the UK as an opportunity, in the same way I've talked about with We Out Here, to talk, you know, to talk about the other elements of those cultures outside of the music. So cinema and record shops and talks and so forth. But it was centred around dub and reggae, dubstep, drum and bass, hip hop, garage music, new jungle scenes and everything. So yeah, quite similar to the original Outlook Festival.
Anybody ask any questions?
Yeah, well, what's been your, like, you know, sort of social life sort of been like since you've been doing this? Because obviously that's been like a lot of time involved in these, all of these festivals and all these projects that you've been doing. What's the impact of how you've managed to like work that with your social life as well?
I mean, I think it's a really good question. When I was running club nights when I was at university and afterwards for a while, I was running club nights and for me that was very much like about being a bit of a personality and being there and constantly, but you know, and everyone knew me in Brighton as like the most religious flyerer. Like I would be there in the snow and I was committed to getting that flyer in someone's hand. And I really enjoyed that part of it. But when I stopped running club nights, it was that first step between, you know, being the face of something, and actually quite enjoyed having something the scale of Outlook where I'm behind a laptop. I mean, I walk around the festival site and people don't know me from the next person at all. And in fact, actually lots of people that I work with don't necessarily know me even individually, in terms of they know me behind an email. So I think kind of touching on the point that I said earlier, like I've always had, I'm very, very lucky that I've had a group of friends from school that I've stayed in touch with and have always been, and they have no relevance to my industry whatsoever. And, you know, there's been some really, really down times. You know, I referenced the death that we had on site, and, you know, I called my mates from home, and after we dealt with that situation, I got on the phone to them, and you know, I had a really, really long chat with my friends who were all at home, had no understanding about this industry, and it was really, really important. But I think I'm also slightly detached from some of the musical elements of things, because I'm not the booker. I'm not that music head. So I do go to festivals in a sort of snooty way and go and look at their infrastructure and their operations and how they work. But I'm not out there learning about new emerging bands, and that's generally been my team and my business partner. So I think over the years I've detached it a little bit, and I think that has been quite important. Again, come back to the identity thing. If it ever didn't work out, if I had to stop, if COVID ever, you know, just put a stop to running festivals, then I've kind of come to terms with that now. So I'm quite happy that what we've done is cool, and if it doesn't happen again, then all good. But yeah, you have to try and take some time to switch off. And you know, I've got to that point now where I might work long hours in an office, but I don't work from home. And if I do, I go and sit at a desk, and I don't sort of allow that to just become an extension of my arm, and I plug my phone in away from me when I get home. And, you know, those little things really, really do make a difference, because I know people that just live and breathe it, and the pressures are massive.
Did you have a question?
I was trying to remember what the hell it was.
Sorry, my answer to the last one was a bit too long, wasn't it?
It was a good answer, though. It's about personal and professional boundaries, not staying plugged in 100% of the time, which is important whether you're writing an assignment even or running a festival. You need to know that you're allowing yourself downtime and not to get too consumed in things that you're doing. Otherwise, your brain will start to hurt.
Personally, what would you say has been the most challenging thing that you've had to overcome over your sort of career doing this?
The most acute challenge that I had, and we talked about it earlier, I'd say the worst day in my career was we ran a festival called Sunfall. It ran for 2 years in Brockwell Park. It was a successful event in the sense that we sold out both years that we did. We did 12,500 tickets the first year. The second year we grew to 20,000 people. And so lots of it went well, and what went really badly was the main gate operation, and people queued for hours to get into the festival. And queuing for hours to get into a 4-day camping festival is not great. Queuing for hours to get into an 8-hour music festival in London is not cool at all. And yeah, it was terrible. 20,000 people who think that a decision that you have made is awful and it very much falls upon your shoulders is a really, really sort of heavy weight to bear. And the same people that I called when I was upset around that incident in Croatia, I also called in the middle of that and said, I need you to go and stand on this gate and help me out here. Because and they were all there because well, I've given them free tickets over the years. So that was the most acute thing, and I think how did I sort of get over that? And you just got to take that as a learning experience. It did heavily impact our ability to run that event going forward, and that was a major commercial challenge. But had to look back at why I'd made some of the decisions that I'd made to get to us to that point. And I wasn't the only person that was responsible. There were other people, but I was predominantly responsible for that decision. And it's because I gave into pressures that I wouldn't normally give into, because I was working with a new business partner that I wanted to try and impress and work with. So always always just seeing those challenges as opportunities to learn, and if you can survive them and keep on doing what you're doing, then be thankful for them, I'd say.
How do you deal with anxiety during the actual festivals? Because I'm pretty sure there would be some points where something's going wrong and you don't know how to deal with it fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think the importance of the people that you have around you, not just in terms of their experience, but your ability to communicate with them and share those challenges and work through those challenges. So, you know, I think in the early stages when we were going from like a really, really stripped back infrastructure to, you know, an 12,000 capacity festival, I was really lucky to have, you know, a production manager that year, for example, that was willing to listen to me and be my sounding board. So I think that's a really critical thing. In terms of personally, I think that I don't know. I mean, amongst my friendship group, amongst my professional peers, I have always sort of been told that I have like a sort of a bit of a force field to it often. I think that it's always just approaching something from a logical point of view that, you know, worrying about something or worrying about the impact of something is not going to help solve it. And, you know, in those circumstances, you know, in those major incidents, I've always felt privileged to be able to be involved and to help somebody. Now, you know, being able to be the person who phones a family and says, you know, your child has been involved in an accident, and you know we need to work this out here. I've always been, you know, in that circumstance, for example, I've felt privileged that I can actually help, and always see the fact that things are going to happen in people's lives, in the event industry and whatever it might be. I felt lucky in those circumstances that I could make an impact. And, you know, again, the anxiety thing is sort of along those lines of and what? And if you can continue to ask yourself that and really prioritise the things that do matter, and try and not hold on to the things that don't matter as much, and try and delegate and give responsibility to enough people that will go and do those things and fulfill the tasks that don't quite matter as much, and communicate that with your team in the way in which I sort of said that I learnt myself. So, yeah, a number of ways, but it's also just experience. It's experience of getting it wrong and realising it doesn't matter. You know, realising that you don't quite get something right, and then all your customers come back and say, what an amazing show that was. Didn't really matter that there was queues for the food or whatever. But yeah.
Hi. Going back to the start of your career in doing events, how did you go about getting the location? Did you like email them? Did you come with a team of like? Did you come with your DJ and said, look, I've got a lineup here that I want to get playing tonight? And what was your niche, for example?
So when I started running club nights, yeah, exactly. So I was first year at university, spent a lot of time in clubs in Brighton, and I actually started flyering for some of the club nights in my first year. So I was sort of a little bit aware of who ran what club, and because I was offering to go out flyering for these different club shows. And so yeah, I mean, I approached one of the venues in Brighton and sort of said, look, I'd just like to rent the venue, and I put a bit of, I can't remember exactly what the deal was, but I probably paid a couple of £100 for the venue, and knew that I was going to charge people and hoped that would sort of add up, and you know, always felt comfortable enough with numbers, so was kind of like, you know, okay to do this and think that it might add up, and not really to earn money out of, although I probably did earn a little bit out of the first show. In terms of the festivals, you know, it's a much more complicated setup. So Croatia is not a great example because the first year kind of fell into our laps, and the other years I sourced through Croatian contacts that I'd developed over the first year. But the UK, for example, when we wanted to go and do a new show, We Out Here is a good example. We first took to a site in Cambridgeshire, which was previously known for the Secret Garden Party, which was a famous festival that ran for 17 years and stopped running in 2017, I think. We approached them and said, look, we'd like to do a festival on your site. The festival owners also own the venue, and I'd been there many times, and they weren't running their festival anymore, so we put ours in. And that ran on that site for 3 years, and then Secret Garden Party returned, so we decided we didn't want to sort of play second fiddle and work on that site anymore, and we've just moved to Dorset. Now, you have to convince a landowner that putting 15,000 people, 20,000 people on their land is a good thing, and sell who you are, but also that you're not going to piss off all of their neighbours and really create a bad reputation for the landowners. You then need to go and do that with all of your local authorities. You need to obtain a licence, and you need to apply for a licence and design the festival site. So you kind of have to do all of those things. You have to basically plan the festival out as you're looking at a venue. And there's lots of different restrictions to a festival venue. You know, you've got to have good road networks to enter it. You can't just have like one route in and out. You won't be able to deliver a show. You have to have a number of entrants and exits. You have to have it's helpful if you have certain infrastructure in site. How you can access different areas of the site are really important. So it's a real game. And honestly, I've spent days just scrolling through the UK on Google Maps, looking at like open sites and looking at their road networks, and then contacting stately home landowners and the forestry societies and whatever else.
More questions, guys?
So, what are your initial steps of setting up a festival?
Well, so those that I just sort of ran through in terms of finding the site. Once you've got the site, you've got to try and work out, really from a business point of view, work out what you believe you can achieve in terms of revenue, in terms of sales. So work out your income from ticket sales, from bar sales, from food sales, all of your different revenue streams. Forecast what you think you might be able to achieve, and then you've got a number that hopefully you can try and work backwards from then, and then build out your budgets. And the first step is the financial feasibility. Do you think you're able to make this add up, first of all? But at the same time, you then need to sort of plan the site and work out where you're going to have people coming in from. Have you got enough space for your camping? And it's a real sort of juggling act. And we're moving to this new site, and I've been looking at this festival site, and I've probably been there 10 times. And I've got a team of people working across different departments, and we're still moving things around the site and trying to work out quite what the total capacity of the event is, because if we move this one stage a little bit further into the site, I can open up a bit more camping, and so it has to start with the finances. That always requires an element of how much infrastructure is going to go in here, but you should always really start with the income, the revenue side of things, and then work backwards from what you've got to spend. Create your full picture and then go, is it worth it? And I usually walk head first into it at that point.
We've probably got time for one more. Is there anybody else that might have a question?
If you don't, I do. Go on.
Hi. So when the festival's on, how much of it are you able to enjoy, and how much time are you spending stressing over stuff?
It's a really good question, and every show is different, every year is different, and but it's probably the one thing that over the last couple of years I haven't got right, actually. I haven't done properly, because to be able to improve the show, you need to be there. You need to see, we always get customer feedback and understand from people what is important to them and whether they had a good time or not. But to really go and see whether you achieved what you meant to achieve and how well it connects with your audience and just how the customer flow moves through the different sites, all these different things you need to be able to see in person. And a lot of the time you get caught up with dealing with other things, and we were talking about earlier about 2021 was the return after COVID, and we only had 2 months to be able to plan and deliver the event. So that year was really not so much about the stress, but really, really busy on site, and I didn't see hardly any of the festival. For We Out Here, for example. For this year's We Out Here 2022, I did catch a bit more of it, and I felt, but certainly something I need to spend more time on doing. But I attend the sort of event liaison meeting, the emergency liaison meetings, and the sort of top level stuff. I sit across all of the finances of the event, so it's quite important to sort of notice how the bars are doing, how the food's doing, and look at all that data coming in. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I'd go and try every food trader, listen to as many bands as possible, see what people are talking about. It's one of the best things around is walking around a festival site and listening to people talking about the festival when they don't know who you are is fantastic. But I'm going to keep that in mind now.
Do you have any sort of final comments or any advice that you'd give any of the students that are looking to pursue a career in the industry?
I think for me, one of the things was, people always talked about this element of networking. People talk about putting yourself out there and networking because, I'd say all of my opportunities came through other people and, having conversations. And the industry as a whole is a very supportive and collaborative space. But from my point of view, and I've had this conversation with, young people entering the industry over a number of years. It's not. When I say networking, I don't necessarily mean go to functions and events and stick your hand out and shake someone's hand and give them your card. But it's just about seeing every opportunity that every interaction that you've got as a potential networking opportunity, and just seeing look, the people around you in your own course, what are their skill sets? How could you do something with them? The opportunity of being at university is its own networking opportunity. Is my feeling. Is I just, that sounds really sort of manipulative, but I had a huge amount of social interactions at university that created a network of people that came and supported all of the events that I did, and got them off the ground. In effect, so in people, there are loads of different opportunities depending on how you open. So just staying open to those and imagine every experience you're in as a potential networking opportunity. That's one of mine.
Well, great note to end on. Can we put our hands together for Joe, please?
Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone for attending the session. We need to get this room sort of converted around so we can try and leave the areas sort of tidy. And I'm sure if you might have any questions, I'm sure Joe will be happy to maybe come up into Metronome and answer.
I'll be hanging about.
Cool.